The Galactic Council chamber had witnessed declarations of war, the rise of empires, and the collapse of civilizations. Suspended above the capital world of the Interstellar Alliance, the immense structure housed representatives from thousands of species. Decisions made within its walls shaped the fate of entire star systems. On this day, humanity stood alone. The session had been called under the pretense of addressing a growing economic emergency. Trade networks across several regions were failing. Resource shortages were spreading. Powerful member states were demanding solutions before instability reached their own worlds. The human delegation expected difficult negotiations. What they received was something entirely different. As the chamber filled, delegates from the dominant species exchanged confident glances. Weeks of private meetings had already determined the outcome. The vote scheduled for the session was merely the final step. At the center platform stood Ambassador Evelyn Ward, Earth's senior representative. Calm and composed, she listened as one speaker after another described humanity as an economic burden. A towering representative from the Varel Dominion claimed humanity contributed little of strategic value. Another delegate argued that Earth's territories occupied trade corridors better utilized by more productive civilizations. A third openly questioned whether humans deserved full membership within the alliance at all. The accusations continued for hours. Not once were the claims supported by evidence. Not once was humanity given an opportunity to respond. The outcome had been decided long before the meeting began. Finally, the Council Chancellor activated the central display. A proposal appeared above the chamber. Human territories would be seized and redistributed among member powers. Earth's industries would be absorbed into foreign administrations. Human populations would be relocated under labor agreements controlled by the Council. The language was carefully written. The reality was not. Humanity was being sold. Murmurs of approval spread through the chamber. Several delegates applauded openly. Others looked amused. To them, this was simply politics. The weak sacrificed for the convenience of the powerful. The Chancellor addressed the Assembly. The proposal is now open for final vote. Thousands of voting markers illuminated across the chamber. Green lights appeared almost instantly. Entire blocks voted together. Military powers voted yes. Trade coalitions voted yes. Corporate governments voted yes. One after another, support for the resolution climbed higher. The human delegation remained silent. When the final count appeared, the result was overwhelming. The proposal had passed. A wave of celebration swept through the chamber. Delegates congratulated one another. Some discussed how human territory would be divided. Others were already calculating profits. Not a single voice questioned the morality of the decision. For the first time in generations, an intelligent species had been legally stripped of its sovereignty by the very organization that claimed to protect civilization. The Chancellor raised a hand for silence. The vote is complete. His gaze shifted toward the human platform. Humanity will be granted one final statement before implementation procedures begin. Many delegates laughed. Several expected outrage. Others anticipated desperate pleading. Instead, Ambassador Evelyn Ward slowly rose from her seat. Her expression showed no fear, no anger, no panic. She simply looked across the chamber at the thousands who had just voted to dismantle her species. Then she smiled. The reaction was immediate. Confused whispers spread through the audience. The smile wasn't forced. It wasn't the smile of someone defeated. It was the smile of someone who had just watched another person make a catastrophic mistake. The laughter gradually faded. Even the Chancellor appeared unsettled. Evelyn activated her console and stepped forward. Before today's vote becomes official, she said calmly, there is something every member of this council deserves to know. A few delegates rolled their eyes. Others ignored her completely. She continued anyway. For centuries, your governments have spoken about humanity as though we were insignificant,
weak,
replaceable. The chamber remained quiet. You believe Earth's removal will strengthen your economies. Her gaze swept across the representatives who had voted against her people. You believe civilization will continue exactly as it has before. A faint sense of unease began spreading through the audience. Evelyn's smile never disappeared. There's only one problem with that assumption. The massive chamber fell completely silent. You have absolutely no idea who built the civilization you're standing in. For a moment, nobody reacted. Then laughter erupted from every level of the chamber. Mocking comments echoed from dozens of platforms. The claims sounded ridiculous, absurd, impossible. Evelyn waited patiently for the noise to subside. When it finally did, she looked directly at the council leadership. "You voted to sell humanity today," she said softly. "Tomorrow, you'll discover what that decision actually cost you." And for the first time since the session began, uncertainty appeared in the eyes of those who believed they had already won. The laughter lingered for several seconds before fading into scattered chuckles. Most delegates dismissed Evelyn's statement as a desperate attempt to preserve dignity after a humiliating defeat. The dominant powers had spent generations treating humanity as a secondary civilization. The idea that humans had somehow built the foundations of galactic society sounded absurd. Evelyn seemed completely unconcerned by their reaction. Without raising her voice, she touched the console before her. A series of encrypted files appeared above the chamber. Thousands of data streams unfolded across the central display. The Chancellor frowned. "These records are restricted." "They were," Evelyn replied, "until 10 minutes ago." Several delegates exchanged uneasy looks. The first document expanded into view. It was ancient, dating back nearly 4 centuries. Most observers expected it to be irrelevant. Instead, the chamber's translation systems immediately identified it as an engineering authorization contract. A contract signed by 12 founding member civilizations. The purpose of the agreement was simple: construction of the first stable interstellar trade network. A murmur spread across the chamber. Every student in the galaxy knew that project. Entire economies had been built around it. Historians considered it the beginning of modern civilization. The lead contractor listed on the agreement stunned everyone. Human Systems Engineering Consortium. Evelyn opened another file. Then another. Then another. The displays multiplied. Records of hyperspace route construction. Navigation grid deployments. Communication relay networks. Orbital infrastructure projects. Resource transportation systems. The deeper the archives went, the stranger the pattern became. Human organizations appeared everywhere. Not occasionally. Consistently. Across centuries of development. Across thousands of worlds. A representative from the Varel Dominion rose immediately. These documents could be fabricated. Evelyn nodded. A reasonable concern. She activated another sequence. Independent verification requests were automatically transmitted to historical databases, academic institutions, and government archives throughout known space. Responses began arriving almost instantly. Authentic. Authentic. Verified. Confirmed. The confirmations continued flooding into the system. The room grew noticeably quieter. A historian from one of the oldest civilizations suddenly requested speaking privileges. His species had preserved records for nearly 3,000 years. His voice carried none of the confidence heard earlier. "We are finding matching references in our archives." The statement triggered immediate discussion across hundreds of platforms. Evelyn allowed it to continue. Many delegates hurriedly accessed historical databases of their own. What they found only deepened the confusion. The evidence was everywhere, hidden in plain sight. Human companies had designed technologies considered essential to galactic life. Human engineers had solved problems that had stalled development for generations. Human logistics specialists had created methods that connected thousands of star systems into a single economic network. Yet almost nobody remembered any of it. The reason became clear as additional records appeared. Humanity had never sought political control. They licensed technology, completed contracts, accepted payment, then moved on to the next challenge. Over time, their work became so widespread that its origins disappeared beneath layers of expansion and adaptation. Success had made the creators invisible. A delegate from a commercial coalition stared at the data in disbelief. "That's impossible." Evelyn looked directly at him. "Is it?" Another archive opened. This one contained development logs from the first quantum communication grid. the system used daily by trillions. Again, the lead architects were human. Then came transportation algorithms. Again, human. Infrastructure management frameworks. Human. Emergency stabilization protocols. Human. The pattern repeated so frequently that denial became increasingly difficult. The council chamber no longer sounded victorious. It sounded uncertain. The confidence that had filled the room after the vote was evaporating. Questions replaced celebration. How much had humanity actually built? How deeply were they involved? How many systems depended on their work? Most importantly, why reveal this now? The chancellor finally interrupted. Even if everything you're presenting is accurate, history does not alter today's decision. Evelyn's expression remained calm. No, history doesn't. She expanded a final collection of records. Unlike the earlier files, these weren't centuries old. Some were active, current, operational. The significance struck several delegates immediately. Humanity had not simply created the foundations of galactic civilization. Certain records suggested they were still connected to them. The realization spread through the chamber like a silent shockwave. For the first time since the vote, genuine concern appeared on the faces of powerful leaders. Evelyn watched them carefully. She could see the moment the questions changed. They were no longer asking whether humanity had built these systems. They were asking what that meant. The ambassador folded her hands and allowed the silence to grow. Finally, she spoke. What you've seen today is merely the beginning of the story. No one laughed this time, because somewhere beneath the confusion, a far more dangerous possibility had begun to emerge. If humanity had truly built the systems that sustained the galaxy, then removing humanity might prove far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The silence that followed Evelyn's last statement felt heavier than any argument exchanged during the session. Only hours earlier, the council had believed it was deciding humanity's fate. Now, many delegates were beginning to suspect they had voted without understanding the consequences. The chancellor regained his composure first. Explain exactly what you're implying. Evelyn nodded as though she had expected the question. I'm implying nothing. I'm presenting facts. Another set of files appeared across the chamber. Unlike the historical archives shown earlier, these records were operational reports generated within the last few minutes. Delegates immediately recognized the source identifiers. Trade Authority, Navigation Directorate, Interstellar Communications Bureau, Strategic Infrastructure Administration, the organizations responsible for keeping civilization functioning. Concerns spread rapidly. Several officials began opening secure channels to their governments. The first alert arrived before anyone could speak. A major shipping corridor connecting 3 economic sectors had reported severe synchronization failures. Freight vessels were experiencing navigation delays. The issue was minor, at least initially. A second report appeared, then a third, then dozens more. Communication relays across multiple regions were requesting administrative verification before processing network updates. Routine commands were being rejected. Automated systems that normally operated without interruption had suddenly become cautious. Delegates stared at the reports in confusion. The infrastructure wasn't shutting down. It was questioning authority. The distinction terrified the experts. A representative from the Transportation Alliance stood abruptly. Why are these systems requesting human authorization credentials? No one answered immediately. Many had already noticed the same detail. Every report contained identical references. Human oversight protocols, human engineering signatures, human administrative architecture. The foundations hidden beneath centuries of upgrades were becoming visible. Evelyn allowed the evidence to speak for itself. The chancellor's expression hardened. Did humanity sabotage these networks? The accusation echoed through the chamber. Several delegates immediately supported it. The explanation felt convenient. Evelyn shook her head. No. Then explain what's happening. Your vote triggered implementation procedures. The chamber fell silent again. She continued calmly. For centuries, human engineers maintained ownership verification systems inside critical infrastructure. Shock rippled across the assembly. Not weapons. Not secret armies. Ownership. The concept sounded almost ridiculous until everyone realized its implications. Humanity had built these networks. Humanity had maintained legal authority over portions of them. Humanity had simply never exercised that authority because cooperation had always been more valuable than control.
Until today.
A military delegate narrowed his eyes. "You're threatening the Council." "No," Evelyn replied. "The Council threatened itself." Additional alerts appeared overhead. Economic forecasting systems were updating projections in real time. Trade efficiency was declining. Shipping schedules were slipping. Transaction processing rates were slowing across multiple sectors. The numbers weren't catastrophic.
Yet.
What frightened analysts was the trend. Civilization depended on systems nobody fully understood. Systems originally designed by people the Council had just voted to dispossess. Across the chamber, advisors scrambled through forgotten legal agreements. The results were alarming. Human corporations had embedded maintenance authorities into countless contracts. Emergency oversight clauses existed throughout major infrastructure frameworks. Most governments had never paid attention to them. Why would they? The systems worked. Nobody questioned their origins. Now those neglected details were becoming impossible to ignore. A transmission interrupted the growing panic. It came from a remote economic hub located thousands of light years away. Their central logistics network had entered restricted operation mode. Nothing had failed. Nothing had been damaged. The systems simply refused to process commands from administrators lacking recognized authorization pathways. Human authorization pathways. The room erupted into arguments. Some demanded immediate technical intervention. Others called for emergency investigations. Several representatives accused one another of negligence. The confidence that had dominated the vote was completely gone. In its place stood uncertainty. The galaxy's most powerful leaders were discovering how dependent they truly were. Evelyn remained remarkably calm amid the chaos. Perhaps because none of this surprised her. Centuries earlier, human planners had identified a simple reality. Civilizations changed. Governments changed. Alliances changed.
Trust changed.
The infrastructure supporting those civilizations needed protection from reckless decisions. Human engineers had built safeguards accordingly, not to dominate others, to ensure survival. No one had imagined those safeguards would one day be activated by the Galactic Council itself. The Chancellor finally raised his voice above the arguments. What does humanity want? That question silenced the chamber more effectively than any command. Every delegate turned toward Evelyn. For the first time, the balance of power felt different. Humanity was no longer standing before judges. The judges were seeking answers from humanity. Evelyn looked across the assembly. At the politicians who had celebrated her species' downfall. At the leaders who believed humanity was weak. At the civilizations that had mistaken patience for dependence. Then she delivered a response that unsettled them more than any threat could have. At this moment, she said, humanity wants nothing. The words landed like a shockwave. Because if humanity wasn't acting out of revenge, then everything happening now was merely the natural consequence of the Council's own decision. And the reports arriving every minute suggested those consequences were only beginning. The story draft continues below. Within 48 standard hours, the crisis spread beyond the Council chamber and into every major sector of civilized space. What had initially appeared to be isolated administrative disruptions evolved into a systemic problem affecting governments, corporations, and military organizations alike. Nothing was exploding. No fleets were attacking. No infrastructure had been destroyed. That made the situation far worse. The systems were functioning exactly as designed. They were simply no longer operating under assumptions that humanity would always remain a cooperative partner. Economic forecasts became increasingly grim. Freight deliveries that once crossed multiple sectors with flawless precision now encounter delays at countless checkpoints. Automated logistics networks demanded validation procedures nobody had used in centuries. Commercial hubs reported declining throughput. Manufacturing worlds struggled to maintain production schedules. Every investigation led to the same conclusion. Human-designed architecture sat beneath nearly everything. For generations, Those foundations had been taken for granted. Now, entire industries were discovering how dependent they truly were. Public awareness followed quickly. News networks across thousands of worlds obtained leaked records from the council vote. Citizens learned that their leaders had attempted to dismantle the sovereignty of an allied species for economic gain. The reaction was immediate. Protests erupted across major population centers. Political opposition groups demanded accountability. Journalists uncovered private communications showing that many delegates had discussed humanity as a resource rather than a civilization. Trust in the council began collapsing. Several representatives resigned before formal investigations could begin. Others attempted to defend their actions. Those efforts only worsened public outrage. The narrative spreading through the galaxy was devastatingly simple. Humanity had spent centuries building systems that benefited everyone. The council had responded by trying to sell humanity. Even species with no particular affection for humans recognized the hypocrisy. Meanwhile, emergency meetings multiplied. Economic alliances sought direct contact with Earth. Trade organizations requested negotiations. Regional governments proposed temporary suspensions of the anti-human resolution. Their messages flooded diplomatic channels. Most received polite acknowledgments. Very few received immediate answers. Humanity was in no hurry. The Council had spent months preparing its vote. Earth could afford patience. As conditions deteriorated, some leaders proposed more aggressive solutions. Military intervention became a topic of discussion. If humanity controlled critical infrastructure, perhaps force could compel cooperation. The idea lasted less than a day. Strategic analysts delivered simulation after simulation demonstrating the same outcome. Galactic fleets depended on logistical frameworks linked to human systems. Supply distribution, maintenance coordination, navigation optimization, resource allocation. Every major military organization relied upon technologies originating from human engineering networks. The fleets could still fight. They simply could not operate efficiently over extended periods. Without stable logistics, numerical superiority meant little. The military option quietly disappeared. Then an even more disturbing discovery emerged. A classified review of historical records revealed that humanity's influence extended beyond economics. Many of the security systems protecting trade routes from piracy had human origins. Disaster response frameworks used during planetary emergencies traced back to human designs. Critical stabilization technologies preventing hyperspace corridor failures had been developed by human research groups centuries earlier. The galaxy wasn't merely benefiting from human contributions. It was resting upon them. The realization changed everything. The conversation was no longer about punishing humanity. The conversation became how civilization had forgotten its dependence in the first place. Earth, meanwhile, remained remarkably restrained. No sanctions, no retaliation, no threats. Human authorities simply allowed the consequences of the Council's actions to unfold naturally. That restraint unsettled many observers. Powerful civilizations expected revenge. Instead, they encountered discipline. Humanity possessed leverage beyond anything previously imagined, yet refused to exploit the situation for conquest. That choice forced uncomfortable reflection throughout the galaxy. Perhaps humans had never been weak. Perhaps they had simply been responsible. As the days passed, diplomatic requests transformed into appeals. Former rivals sought dialogue. Former critics requested forgiveness. Former allies admitted their silence during the vote had been a mistake. One by one, governments distanced themselves from the resolution. The coalition that had supported humanity's dispossession began fragmenting under political pressure. The Council itself stood on the edge of paralysis. Its authority weakened with every passing report. Its credibility diminished with every new revelation. And through it all, one question dominated discussions from the wealthiest core worlds to the most distant colonies. What would humanity do next? The answer mattered because everyone finally understood the truth. The species they had dismissed as ordinary possessed influence greater than fleets, wealth greater than empires, and patience greater than any political institution. For centuries, humanity had quietly held civilization together without demanding recognition. Now the galaxy was experiencing life without that certainty. And for the first time in modern history, the leaders who once viewed humans as expendable found themselves waiting anxiously for Earth's decision. 3 weeks after the vote that had nearly dismantled humanity, the Galactic Council convened once more. The atmosphere could not have been more different. The delegates who entered the chamber this time carried none of the confidence they had displayed before. The celebrations were gone. The certainty was gone. Even the political alliances that had dominated galactic affairs for centuries appeared fractured. Every representative understood a simple reality. Humanity now possessed more leverage than any civilization in recorded history. Yet Earth had done nothing to seize power. That fact confused many leaders more than the crisis itself. They had expected retaliation. They had expected sanctions. Some had even expected war. Instead, humanity had allowed the galaxy to confront the consequences of its own arrogance. The lesson had been devastatingly effective. When Ambassador Evelyn Ward stepped forward once again, the chamber fell silent immediately. Nobody interrupted. Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned her right to speak. For the first time, every voice in the galaxy wanted to hear what humanity would say. The Chancellor rose from his seat. On behalf of the Council, he formally revoked the resolution against Earth. He acknowledged procedural misconduct. He admitted that humanity had been treated unjustly. Then he offered an official apology supported by an overwhelming majority of member governments. The statement was historic. Yet Evelyn showed little reaction. She had not come for apologies. She had come to decide the future. The Council wishes to know humanity's terms, the Chancellor said carefully. The question echoed through the chamber. Many delegates lowered their eyes. They expected demands. Economic control, political authority, permanent influence over interstellar affairs. After everything that had happened, such requests would have been understandable. Instead, Evelyn surprised them all. Humanity has no interest in ruling the galaxy. A wave of confusion moved through the assembly. She continued before anyone could respond. Power was never our objective. If it had been, we could have pursued it centuries ago. The statement carried weight because everyone now knew it was true. Humanity had possessed influence long before the crisis. It simply had never used that influence to dominate others. We built networks because civilizations needed connection. We solved problems because progress benefits everyone. We created systems that outlasted governments because stability matters more than politics. Delegates listened carefully. Many found themselves uncomfortable. They were hearing a philosophy fundamentally different from the one that had guided galactic leadership for generations. Evelyn activated the central display. A new document appeared above the chamber. Its title contained only 3 words: the Cooperative Charter. This is humanity's proposal. Every representative began reviewing the contents immediately. The principles were remarkably straightforward. No member civilization could be stripped of sovereignty through economic pressure. All sentient species would receive equal legal protections. Major infrastructure systems would operate under transparent oversight. Technological advancements critical to public welfare would be shared rather than monopolized. Emergency governance decisions would require independent review to prevent abuse of authority. The document contained no provisions granting humanity special privileges. That realization stunned many observers. Earth was restructuring the system without placing itself above it. The proposal demanded responsibility, not obedience. A delegate from a powerful trade coalition finally spoke. After everything the Council attempted, why offer partnership at all? The question lingered in the silence. Evelyn answered without hesitation. Because revenge solves nothing. The simplicity of the response made it impossible to ignore. We didn't build civilization to own it. We built it because cooperation creates opportunities that isolation never can. Across the chamber, representatives who had once supported the vote against humanity found themselves unable to argue. Humanity had every reason to seek retribution. Instead, it offered a better future. The contrast exposed the failures of the old system more effectively than any accusation. Voting commenced shortly afterward. This time, there was no celebration before the results appeared. Only anticipation. When the final count concluded, support for the cooperative charter exceeded every prediction. The old resolution was erased permanently. The institutions responsible for its creation began dissolving almost immediately. A new alliance emerged in their place. One built upon accountability rather than exploitation. One designed to prevent another injustice from ever reaching a vote. As delegates prepared to leave, Evelyn delivered a final statement that would be remembered for generations. The moment you voted to sell humanity, you believed you were deciding our future. She paused briefly. In reality, you were revealing how much of your own future depended on us. No one disputed the truth of those words. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humanity's greatest strength was not superior technology. It was foresight, not military power. Responsibility, not domination. Restraint. Civilizations rise through strength, wealth, and ambition. But they endure through wisdom. And when the galaxy finally understood that distinction, it discovered why humanity had always been far more powerful than anyone imagined.